Hey, Paul, thank you for doing this. And you're in California, right? Why don't we
Great.
first have you describe a little bit about what your background is, and you're in the start. Have been in the startup space since I knew you more than 10 years ago, and you were evangelizing startup in Hong Kong for a long time, and now I know that you're teaching like startups, right, in California.
It's good to see you and to catch up. So my background, um, I had a startup in New York that was a time at which I made just about every mistake possible, to make. Both,
Okay.
both in terms of assuming that we knew what customers really wanted, or actually even assuming we really knew who the customers were. So we ended up, drastically changing. We could talk about this later on, but just brief overview. So, so I had this experience of going through you know, that same struggle that a lot of startup founders go through, and in
Mhm.
that process of figuring things out and meeting a lot of other people who are also startup founders, I became really interested in that, that process that founders go through. And so, yeah, to your point, I am teaching now, but a lot of the steps that kind of got me to this stage were
Uh-huh.
me engaging with founders along the way. So along the way, after my own startup in New York, I started to run like a founder roundtable series in New York. Also,
Mhm.
I'd get 8 or 10 founders together. We talk. Um, I guess we originally met, in Hong Kong, but I knew
Startups
that
HK, right? Was that Startups HK
um, the
around that
first
time?
thing I did there, I think I called it Startup Boot Camp.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so it was not a funded accelerator program in the beginning. It was
Uh-huh.
like a boot camp that founders would apply to and then go through, almost like it was like taking a class.
Yeah.
And out of that, that funded accelerator came. So
Okay.
yeah, so I kind of dove into things here, but like just the high level was I started with some of that same experience of building a startup that ended up going in a very different direction than we assumed
Mhm.
it was going to go.
Mhm.
Getting more interested in how founders go through that process of discovery, and then doing
Uh-huh.
something to support founders. So like that founder roundtable that I mentioned, and then a startup boot camp in Hong Kong. And I ended up back in Hong Kong. So I had worked in Hong Kong earlier in my career as well, but I ended up back there because I was looking for a new market to go into that I thought still had some, some open space for somebody new to show up. In New York. So this is around 2011, 2012. In New York at that time, there already were about 10, accelerator programs, and I didn't
Oh.
think it made sense. Right. I mean, it was already, I think, a little saturated. So I didn't think it made sense to try to start the 11th one. And I was,
Oh.
well, where else could I go to do this? I probably would be happy doing this, even if it's in a new location. And I thought back to Hong Kong, where I had worked for a number of years earlier in my career. I took a scouting trip over there. This is like late 2011.
Uh-huh.
Met many people as I could. Um, Hong Kong's a very easy place to get connected, fast, I'd say.
Right.
And yeah, ended up kind of kicking this idea around of bringing a startup accelerator to Hong Kong. Kept the discussions going after I went back to New York. Over a period of about 6 months. Was able to put together a boot camp that I first ran, and then out of that kind of came the backing for Accelerator HK, which was the
Mm.
funded accelerator program there.
Okay. Okay.
But
Maybe just for our audience, background, because my channel is more on like UX and design thinking, so people might be, why are we talking about startup? But I think there's a huge connection here because um, in the early phases of a startup, you kind of have a hypothesis of who your customers are, right? And you have to kind of validate and agile and tweak, your product.
Right.
And in the user experience process, actually, in Hong Kong, I think less UX designers know the front portion of UX, which is user research. And that's exactly the same as what startups do in terms of customer validation. It's exactly the same thing. And then later part, when we like prototype the product, we do what we call user testing, and then start language is actually customer validation, right? So it's completely in line. It's just like it came from two different worlds, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then we use two different languages. So that's where I see the connection. And more now, I feel that designers who have acquired the business skills to talk to founders can help with the front end portion of even identifying like who is the customer before the founder even pours code into
Right.
we've seen so many startups like start with hiring a programmer, building it for a whole year before they even talk to a customer, right?
Yes.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about your accelerator program now, and where are you teaching now? It's
right.
like,
yeah, and thanks. I know I kind of just jumped into things, but so I teach at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I do a couple things there. So I teach in the entrepreneurship department.
Okay.
So I teach everything from feasibility analysis, which I think is also maybe just a more traditional way of doing many of the things that you've just described. So like, how do you figure out, what this business is about, who the customer is, what is the business model, right? Like a lot of those things. And then I also teach a class in growth hacking or growth marketing. So in other words, once you already have something, and this is for like a bit later stage companies, once you already have something that seems to be working, how do you try to turn on some of that growth, in customer acquisition? Understanding lifetime value, understanding customer acquisition cost, understanding cycle time. And the other thing that I do on campus is I run the university, what really is like a startup accelerator. It's a university program, so we're not taking equity in the companies, and we're also not giving you a check when you come in the door, but it's largely similar in terms of program, meaning that so you apply as normal. We're interested in teams that are, I'd say balanced. So it's not only, business people or only developers, right? And that balance is certainly, just a part of being able to, go out and learn in the different directions that you need to go, whether it is from the building like some minimal tech that you can go to these potential customers with, iterating, going back and doing it again and again. And so in this program, it's obviously been remote now for the last half year, but the typical format for the program has been, I kind of maybe sit in the middle and connect a lot of the dots, but I bring a lot of people in to do workshops or office hours, on everything from design, pricing, marketing, legal and accounting issues, customer acquisition, to the kind of more internal side, which is, okay, let's build a nice community among the different founding members of these companies, both in the current batch and in previous batches. That community is really important, I've found. And where there's a fit or where there's a need on an individual basis, we'll kind of dive into like the unique needs of any individual company. And that might mean, for example, they are going down the path of raising capital. So how do we prepare them for that? Maybe introduce them appropriately, maybe like help them get connected to a others who have talked to the same, investors, that they are, now going to talk to, like a lot of that support that would be common in, many different startup accelerators. But it's really themed around, helping people figure out what they should be working on, where they might be, like trying to avoid places that they might be, wasting time. So like you earlier mentioned, if you come in with this mindset of, well, I'm going to hire, developers and they're going to, write code for a year and then every, problem is solved, then you're probably setting yourself up for like a big surprise.
I see.
Right.
I see.
So we, try to just, to balance out a lot of those issues that people might have. And I don't know, having done this for a little while I've done this now in Los Angeles, I did this in Hong Kong. I was involved in a program that ran in Rome, a few years ago. So seeing some very different local ecosystems, and then also be able to kind of like see many different industries, because in general, I'm not industry, targeted, anymore. I used to be, but I'm now pretty generalized. It kind of helps connect some of these dots across different companies. Yeah.
Right. So, can you talk a little bit about how these different ecosystems work? Like culturally, how different is it? Yeah.
Oh, sure. And I'm going to be a little out of date on a couple of them, but well, I'll just go in order. So Hong Kong, when I was there, so this is 2012, 2013, it was a very interesting time. What, say again? What?
Longer to me that when I met you, it felt
well,
I mean, it was only a year, right?
Maybe I met you in 2011 and when I was first there, kind of scouting it out. But well, I don't know. It's a lot has happened in that time. That's why it feels so long.
Oh yeah, true. Well, for the audience sake, like I think Hong Kong Star community started with like a room full of people,
Right.
to now, like there are many co-work spaces and accelerator programs, incubator programs.
Yes.
Yeah, especially in fintech, right? Yeah, so it has changed quite a bit, I would say. And also, the reason why we as UX designers are involved is because the growth of the UX community is because of the growth of the tech startup community.
Sure. Yeah, they're intertwined.
Yeah, it's kind of like two sides of the same coin, right? It's because of that many startups came about. So that's why they had to hire more UX designers, which historically designers were only in like the big banks or Jockey Club or Philips Design. I mean, there are not that many jobs in corporate design.
Right.
Yeah, it's only 1% of companies in Hong Kong are corporate design, right? The rest are like small, medium enterprises. And then when as small, medium enterprises in Hong Kong don't know how to use designers, right? Like trading companies don't need designers.
Sure.
Like mom and pop shops don't need designers. It's tech startups that need designers, right? So that's how,
right.
it kind of intertwined, right?